good Erev Shabbos to all. Vayadaber Adinoya Moshe Lemar, Daber Larn V'Albanav Lemar, Keisavarchu Es B'nei Yisrael Amar Lahem, Yivarechecha Adinoi V'Yishmerecha, Yoir Adinei Pana V'Elecha V'Chuneka, Yisa Adinei Pana V'Elecha V'Yasem Lecha Shalom, V'Samuel Shemi Al B'nei Yisrael V'Ani Avarachem. Today's sermon is sponsored in honor of the yahrzeit of Eliyahu ben Raphael Tshuva, as Neshama should have an aliyah. Also in honor of Laurie Miller's birthday, a happy birthday, Laurie. And also in honor of the shloshim of the passing of David Magarafte's mother, her Neshama should have an aliyah. Thank you all very, very much. Let's start with the portion of Re'eh. This is our particular portion, again, part of the book of Deuteronomy. And towards the latter part of the portion, Moshe is telling them that there will be a time you'll enter the land of Israel and you're going to find those that are in need. And they're going to need support. They're going to need help. And you have been blessed. You have a home. You have food. You have more than they have, and they are in need, and they're turning to you for help. And the Torah tells you, Poseach tiftach es yadecha. Open, you shall open your hand. Help them. But there's that double expression, Poseach tiftach. Open, you shall open. And Moshe repeats it twice. Twice in the same paragraph, he uses the terminology, Poseach tiftach. Open, you shall open. He also uses the word nasain titain, give, you shall give, again, doubling the expression. And the reason why he doubles it is because Moshe understands that it's not easy. Because you want to do it, and you know it's right to help. And yet for some odd reason, when the brain is telling the hand to open in order to give, some strange reason the hand doesn't seem to want to listen. And it comes up with excuses as to why it cannot open. The economy isn't so good. My income is not as strong as it was last year. I don't know what's going to be next year. It's not what it used to be. So the Torah tells you, Poseach tiftach, open, and then it gives you that second open to respond to the excuses that we ourselves give to us as to why it's so hard to open. Poseach tiftach, open you shall open. Nason titain, give you shall give. You know, when God first revealed himself to Moses at the burning bush, so the first thing that he says to him is, remove your shoes from your feet. Why? Why does Moshe have to take his shoes off his feet? Well, generally speaking, when a Jew finds himself standing on sacred ground, he takes off his shoes so as to remove all barriers between himself and the holy soil, so that there's direct contact. The Kohanim, the priests in the holy temple who performed the service, they did it without wearing shoes, so that there be no barriers between them and the floor of the holy temple. So perhaps God is saying the ground that you stand on is sacred, and therefore you need to be connected to the ground to feel that sacredness with no interference, no shoes interfering with that connection. But there's another reason given why Moses was told to remove his shoes at the burning bush. You see, when you're wearing shoes, it's generally a smooth and easy walk. You don't feel every little stone, every little pebble, every bump in the road. So God's message to Moses was, you are about to become the leader of Am Yisrael, the leader of the Jewish people, the leader of an eternal nation. Let's start with, take off your shoes. Because from this day forward, you have to have the sensitivity to every pebble, to every bit of pain, to every bit of sorrow, to every trouble and distress that your flock will encounter in their journeys. Because a key quality for Jewish leadership is empathy, is feeling the pain and the distress of others. You know, when we talk about different personalities out there, we often speak in terms of three. I'm sure you're familiar with the famous Trinity, the Shlemiel, the Shlemazel, and the Nudnik. You know, the Shlemiel, he's the guy who spills the soup. The shlemazel is the one who the soup is spilled on. And the nudnik is the one who wants to know, what kind of soup was it? So in that vein, I'd like to suggest that there are three personality traits. There are those who are apathetic, there are those who are sympathetic, and then there are those who are empathetic. Let's start with apathetic. What is apathy? Like the teacher who asked the class, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? And one kid picks up his hand and says, I don't know and I don't care. Apathy is just that. I don't really care that much. I'm not that bothered. I'm not that affected. I'm unmoved. I'm indifferent. We go, we won't go, we learn, we don't learn, we vote, we don't vote. It doesn't really matter. As long as I have my little space, I'm fine, I'm good. To be apathetic means that you're disconnected. You're disengaged. You're disengaged from the people and from the world around you. I see nothing, I feel nothing, I know nothing. Isolated and detached from people, from God, from the world around you. And it's not a very healthy way to be. Then there's sympathy. Sympathy means that we do connect, but not too deeply. We say hello to one another. We wish them a good Shabbos. We say, how are you? How's it going? You might even stick around for a little bit of the answer. You just hope that it's not going to be a very long answer and you won't have to start looking at the baby pictures and hear the histories of every single relative of theirs. Nice, friendly, cordial. We're involved, but not too involved. We're engaged, but not too engaged. We keep things at arm's length. Like Twitter. Twitter is wonderful. You communicate. You have to communicate in 160 characters or less, otherwise forget it. I don't have the time, the patience, the attention span for anything more than 160 characters. So we can connect. We can even exchange little smiley faces. We can do thumbs up on the social media. We could do the likes. But we don't have to hear each other's voices or see each other's faces. If we really want to just see each other's just their face, then again, we can go onto Facebook and we can see updated photos. That's sympathy. It's on the surface a relationship, and in many instances, it's fine. It's what the situation calls for. You're there. You're just not all there. Which brings to the third level, empathy. Empathy means that I am involved and I am engaged. Empathy means that I am invested in you. I feel for you. I'm generally interested in you because I care about you. Empathy means that you take your shoes off and you feel the plight of another, being right there with the other person, feeling every pebble. You're there with the other person in their circumstances. You're sharing their sorrow and you're rejoicing in their joy. Now, I know you can't have that sort of connection with everyone. There's only so much time and emotional energy that a person has. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, do you have it for anyone? Not for everyone, for anyone. Do you have it with any of your friends? Do you have it with others in the community that are in need? Do you have it with members of your own family? I'm not talking about being supportive or being appreciative. That's sympathetic. I'm talking about empathetic. You know, a woman and her husband once interrupted their vacation to go to a dentist. And the woman says, I want the tooth pulled and I don't want any Novocaine or painkillers because I'm in a hurry. And besides, it adds too much to the bill. So just take the tooth out as quickly as possible and we'll be on our way. The dentist was very impressed. Wow, you're a courageous woman. No anesthetic at all. Okay, which tooth is it? The woman turns to her husband and says, show him the tooth there. That's not empathy. There was this musician back east, a Russian fellow who plays the saxophone. And he plays at a lot of Jewish weddings, but this guy doesn't just play. He gets completely into it. When he's up on stage playing with the rest of the band, he's belting out the music, he's smiling, he's shaking, he's moving. And at many points during the party, he jumps off the stage, jumps off into the dance floor. He goes right into the middle of the circle. He plays his saxophone and he's dancing at the same time. He's in this state of ecstasy. He is so filled with joy and everyone feels it. So someone once asked him, how do you do this night after night? So much excitement, so much energy. None of the other musicians do it. They set their books of notes on their music stand. They play their songs. The night is over. They get paid for a job well done, and they go home. But with you, it's a different story. So he explained that whenever he's hired to play at a Jewish wedding before the party begins, he goes off into a private place and he thinks to himself, Victor, for you, this is another night maybe. Maybe it's another gig, another paycheck. But for that couple out there, for that bride and groom, this is the biggest night of their lives. A night that they and their family members have been waiting for and dreaming about for years. Imagine that it's your sister or your daughter getting married tonight. Put yourself in their place, and that's the way you should go out there and play tonight. When I'm playing at a Jewish wedding, he says, it's not just a job to me. It's mishpacha. It's a family simcha. That's empathy. You're all immersed. You're totally invested in the situation. An elderly man would take a long bus ride each morning to an old age home where his wife of many decades lay in her bed, frail and almost immobile, suffering from the dreaded Alzheimer's disease, Rahman al-Islam. Breakfast was at 7:30 a.m. and the bus ride would take over an hour. But he wouldn't miss a breakfast with his wife. This man would show up every single morning, sit with his wife, feed her, and talk to her. One morning, a nurse approached him and said, look, if you're ever too tired, or it's too cold, or it's raining, or it's snowing out there, I'll take care of her. I'll take good care of her. You really don't have to bother to make this long trip on those mornings. Unfortunately, she doesn't recognize you any longer. So the man replied, you're right. You're right. She doesn't recognize me anymore, but I still recognize her, and I won't miss a breakfast with my wife. Rabbi Abraham Twersky tells a story of how early in his career he served as a psychiatrist in a large state hospital where there were hundreds of mentally ill patients, some of whom have been there for years. And periodically, medical students would visit the hospital and they would tour the facility with them, pointing out some of the unusual and befuddling cases. During one such tour, he pointed out a man who was the most senior patient in the hospital. He had been admitted 52 years earlier at the age of 17 years old. The man was mute, and his records showed that he had not spoken a single word in 52 years. The patient had a routine whereby after breakfast, he would go to a corner of the community room and he would get into this absurd contorted position with his hands raised upward. And he would stay in that one position for hours and hours until he was called to lunch. After lunch, he would return to that position and stay there until supper, and then back again until bedtime. And they tried all types of counseling and therapy and medication, even electric shock treatment, to try to get him to change this behavior. But nothing helped. No amount of urging can get him to sit down except at mealtime. In fact, he was developing all types of bone structure problems as a result of his immobility and his posture, but they couldn't get him to stop. So during the tour, one of the medical students asked if he could talk to the patient. Suit yourself, said Dr. Twersky. The student approaches the patient, and he says to the patient, you must be tired. Why didn't you go sit down? And of course, the man gives him a blank stare and doesn't budge. The student then assumed the same contorted position of the patient, imitating his exact posture, hands in the air and all. And then he says to the patient, I'll tell you what, I'm going to stay here just like this. So I'll take over for you so you can take a rest and sit down now. And without a word, the patient sat down on a bench for the first time in 52 years. Of course, it's impossible to know exactly what was going on in this man's mind. Perhaps in his delusion, he was thinking that by assuming this position, he was holding up the universe or something. And therefore, he couldn't give in to everyone's pleas that he give up the position, lest the whole world collapse. And yes, this behavior was irrational. But this brilliant medical student figured something out. While everyone just dismissed him as crazy, this young man extended himself, showed him real compassion by getting right down there with him. His message to the man is, wherever you are in that frazzled world of yours, I'm there with you. We're in this together. So I'll cover you for now. Empathy means not just to respond to the pain and to the distress of another when called upon, but to anticipate it, even when it's not asked of you. It means to be proactive, to think who needs me out there? Who can I help? Who can I be there for? Is there a friend? Is there a family member? Is there an organization who I can help, who I can turn to by extending myself a bit, just a little bit, investing myself and letting that person know that there's someone there who's thinking about them, who cares about them? Empathy means we take a step out for somebody else. Empathy means you take off your shoes and you're sensitive to the pebbles, to the pain of others. I once heard this great yet simple line. We may not be able to help everyone, but everyone can help someone. Today, the Shabbos is Shabbos Mevorchim Elul. It's the Shabbos in which we're going to bless the upcoming new month, the Hebrew month of Elul. The month of Elul is the month that prepares us for the high holidays. And in this month and in the following days of the high holidays, there will be lots of praying. There will be fasting on Yom Kippur. There will be repenting. We can't forget that we must also take off our shoes and determine that this is the year that we will have more empathy than any year prior in our lives, especially this year when the need is so great, when there are so many that are hurting, there are so many that are in need, so many that are so lonely. Empathy. The month of Elul, the acronym for the month of Elul, Ina liyadei v'samti lach, that we have to be givers. Poseach tiftach, we have to open that hand, open and nason tit, and give of yourself, give of your soul, give of your emotion, give of your friendship, yes, give of your support. Give. That's what we have to be, empathetic to others. In the book of Proverbs, King Solomon makes a statement. And on the surface of it, it seems counterintuitive. He says that a person's generosity brings him abundance. Now, logically, you would say that if you're giving away a chunk of what you have, then you'll be left with less for yourself, not more. And yet the passage says you're going to have more, not less for yourself as a result of the giving. So how does that work? You see, abundance is not a stationary thing. A healthy economy is not one where lots of money is sitting in people's bank accounts. That, in fact, is what we call a recession. A healthy economy is one where there is constant flow, funds coming in, funds going out, like water in a reservoir. There has to be a flow in and out. And it's that way with everything in life. In order to breathe, you can't just inhale oxygen. You also have to exhale carbon dioxide. How does air conditioning work? You take in the hot air and you blow it back out as cold air. There needs to be a flow, a give and a take. There needs to be movement. That's what abundance and blessings are. They are flows of spiritual energy and vitality. You know, one of Forbes' richest men in the world today is a Jew by the name of Sheldon Adelson. I'm sure you've heard his name. He's the chairman and chief executive officer of Sands Las Vegas. And Sheldon Adelson's favorite charity today is Birthright Israel, which provides free trips to Israel for Jewish teens. Once COVID passes, I'm sure once again Birthright will be right up there again, getting teens to fall in love with our holy land of Israel. So I remember reading this article in the Jewish Journal about a recent fundraising event for Birthright, during which Sheldon Adelson gave a speech. And he spoke about his father. His father was a Lithuanian-born, dirt-poor taxi driver who each evening would put all of his spare change into a pushka, into a tzedakah box. And that's what Sheldon remembers. As poor as he was, whatever change was in his pocket at the end of the day, he put into the tzedakah box. And Sheldon spoke of how it pained him so much that this man, who gave whatever he can, especially to Israel, never got to visit the Holy Land himself because he couldn't afford it, which is a big part of why he is so passionate today about sending 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds off to 10-day trips in Israel. He said, my parents were too poor to own rags, but my dad would always say, no matter how poor you are, there's always someone poorer. No matter how difficult your situation, there's always someone in greater need than you. His father instructed him to put a penny from every dollar he ever earned into the pushka, and he's never forgotten that lesson. I may not have done it every single day, he said, but for whatever days I missed, I make it up in bulk. But perhaps the most striking and memorable thing about this article was where Sheldon Adelson said that he and his father both wore an unusual shoe size, 8EEE, and that when he took his first trip to Israel, which was after his father had passed away, he took a pair of his late father's shoes out of the closet and he put them on his feet. And it was while wearing those worn out shoes that he explored the length and the breadth of the Holy Land, bringing his father's hopes and dreams to their fullest realization. From a penny a day into the pushka to giving away hundreds of millions of dollars of charity to get kids to visit Israel. This is the pride and the legacy of people who go through life with a sense of empathy. As the saying goes, what we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. But what we have done for others and the world, that remains immortal. These are the questions well worth pondering. Are we apathetic? Are we sympathetic? Are we empathetic? What kind of shoes do we go through life wearing? And do we ever take those shoes off to feel the pain and joys of others as our own? I want to wish you all a very good Shabbos. It should be a good month of Elul leading into a wonderful year, a blessed year, a year filled with many, many blessings, the year of 5781. We'll talk more about the new year as we get closer. For now, just briefly, Chabad, the Conejo has announced its plans for the high holidays. Rather than me saying it all right now, I'll just give you a website address to go to. It's all there. Go to chabadconejo.com/HH, standing for High Holidays 2020. chabadconejo.com/HH2020. Everything you need to know about the high holidays this year. And if you'd like to join us for in-person outdoor services, you can make your reservations right there. A good Shabbos to all.